Hello and welcome to Fantasy View with me, Jason Hubbard. Here I review fantasy novels to let you know what to read if it catches your fancy, and I let you know about the books I wrote myself. Well, I suppose this had to come sooner or later. A review about a young adult paranormal romance. No, Cushiel's Dart doesn't count, although the Phalan books come close. A paranormal romance is a story that's just like a regular romance, except it has some paranormal elements to it to help keep the story fresh and interesting. Well, maybe not entirely fresh, since I think many paranormal romances still have the same cliches as regular romances. For example, the basic plot of so many bodice rippers is that someone finds someone else attractive, even though that someone is from a very different world. Imagine a pretty city girl discovering a hunky country boy who doesn't go for the iPhones and the Starbucks and the movie nights on Netflix. But damn it, he sure is good looking. Sorry, big city, but old-fashioned sensibilities and huge sweaty muscles trump everything else. Well, paranormal romances work the same way, except that it's not a different nation or lifestyle that separates the two strangers. It's the fact that one of the strangers isn't exactly human. Imagine a girl falling for a boy only to discover he's a vampire. But she still loves him, so she contemplates becoming a vampire herself. Or how about a boy falling for a girl only to discover she's a bitch? I mean, she turns into a female dog when the sun goes down, and so now he's seriously contemplating roaming around on all fours and eating Alpo from the floor just to make her comfortable around him. Such is the case of Everblue by Brenda Pandos. I decided to pick this up because there was an excerpt in one of these Songs of Magic books that I really liked. I figured that even though the book was labeled a romance, there would be plenty of action and adventure for me to sink my teeth into. But as it turns out, I didn't feel like this book was right for me. I'm not saying it's terrible, it's just that I prefer it when the romance in the story isn't so up front and center. I prefer it when there's other stuff going on, rather than the book always asking the question, will they or won't they? Of course, the urge to compare Everblue to Stephenie Meyer's Twilight series is nearly irresistible, but I'll try to keep such comparisons minimal. Besides, I'm sure you can think of comparisons yourself if you've at least seen the first Twilight movie. What was it called again? So, where to begin? I know. Let's start with character names. I think it's pretty common for authors of young adult books to give names that are unique, far from plain. So names like George, John, and Jill are out the door. One of the lead characters is named Finn, which leads me to believe that one of the writers of Star Wars Episode 7 is a huge fan of Everblue. Hey, if Bill Clinton's favorite comedy movie is the 2007 box office dud, Who's Your Caddy, anything's possible. The other lead character is Ashlyn. You see, it's not Ashley, it's Ashlyn. The Lynn is what makes it unique. The fact that I never heard this name before helps to confirm this. Then there's Finn's sister, Tatiana, or Tatch for short. I could make a dirty joke about what word rhymes with Tatch, but this is a family podcast, so fuck it. Some other names sound more common, like Jack, Sally, and Georgia. But the granddaddy of them all is the name of the most attractive boy at school, the pitcher for the baseball team, whose name is Callahan. Freaking Callahan! Like he's one of the knights of King Arthur or something. And he's never called Cal for short, he's always Callahan. I'm sorry, but if you're a high school student and your name is Callahan, people will call you Cal instead, especially if you're the star athlete. Otherwise, people will stuff you in lockers all the time. So right at the beginning, there's little mystery as to what's going on. A family of 4 is living at Lake Tahoe, and it turns out they are mer people. Actually, you don't call them mer people, they're just mers. They are guarding the underwater gate that leads to the great mer city of Natatoria, and they do this by running a business where they give tourists boat rides. It beats maintaining a war room, I guess. Ashlyn is a red-headed high school student who must have ditched Charlie Brown at some point because she now has the hots for her best friend's brother, Finn. Finn likes her too, but he and his family must return to Natatoria, which is so deep underground that it's nearly at the Earth's mantle. Finn and his family think they're going over a trivial matter, but after a meeting with King Phalion, they learn that it's an extended stay. Finn's father will have to be away on a mission, which means his closest family cannot return to Tahoe until he returns. About the first third of the book is split between exposition about MERS and some high school drama, and light drama at that. Ash is a little heartbroken over seeing her BFF Tatch and her brother going away and not calling her, but she's soon distracted over a rare opportunity. It turns out that Sir Callahan, ye old knight of the Round Table, has just broken up with his girlfriend of 2 years, Brooke, and he asks Ash to be his date for the senior ball, which I guess some schools call their proms, that very same night. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that that's one hell of a rebound. I had gotten the feeling that something fishy was going on, like maybe good Sir Callahan had an ulterior motive. But whether he does or not, I feel that the greatest crime here is that the book goes very little into the discussions that he and Ash have, so I didn't get the sense that they had much chemistry together. Sure, he calls her every night and attends her swim meets, but still, even at the prom, or senior ball, or whatever you want to call it, the author doesn't go into much detail about what they talk about, so it seems like much ado about nothing. And oh yeah, by the way, Ash is on the school swim team. She's on the swim team, and the other lead character is a merman. I'm sure this indicates nothing of significance whatsoever. While Finn and his family are living in Anatolia, we get exposition about the lives of MERS. MERS are basically humans filled with a certain essence that's found in the waters of Nanatoria. This essence gives them their fins, of course, but it also gives them supernatural powers of seduction, which they just can't help. Just think of Tiger Woods, who can't help but get booty calls, even after getting married. What's more, all it takes is just one kiss for a mer to be promised, and the other person doesn't even need to be a mer. Once two people are promised, they become each other's entire worlds. All they can think about is each other, and when they're not together, it grieves them terribly. It's not meant to be rational, I suppose. It's just meant to reflect classic mermaid lore about how mermaids lure sailors to their deaths. I think many readers will be uncomfortable with this because the idea of a promising is that one's free will is being overtaken by magic. When the two lead characters eventually end up together by being promised, they may have been attracted to each other before, but the promising amplifies their feelings tenfold. But the concept of a promising is where much of the drama comes from. For instance, it helps explain why King Phalion keeps an iron grip on his people and doesn't let young MERS go about unsupervised when they're around the opposite sex. And of course, the concept of a promising can be abused and exploited. So, is this story strong enough to turn readers on to paranormal romance? Probably not. Is it at least better than Twilight? Anything is better than Twilight. But I suppose the answer is yes. The story is not so weird that it has a vegetarian vampire and a werewolf who doesn't mind dating his crush's daughter. I liked some of the details that the author added to make things interesting and realistic. For instance, the fresh water of Lake Tahoe makes a mer's scales dark and plain, but seawater gives the scales color and luster. There's also a time when Finn made a mighty thrust of his tail and unintentionally created a wave on the surface that rose as high as 6 feet on the ordinarily calm Lake Tahoe. And no, he wasn't having sex or anything. Jeez. I can imagine Beavis and Butthead saying, he said thrust.
Yeah. I like to thrust myself sometimes when no one's looking.
My biggest problem with the book is that it's told in the first person, alternating back and forth between the two lead characters. In my opinion, and really that's all it is, the best way for an author to utilize a first-person narrative is to make the book seem like a personalized experience for the reader. They can do this by making it seem like the reader is checking out a letter or journal. Or they can feel as though the narrator is right there in the room with them, talking directly at them like a friend or a good acquaintance. Author Jacqueline Carey does a good job at this in her Cushiel's Legacy series, where her narrating character does his or her best job at making the reader understand the world they come from, in a personalized manner, which involves giving their opinions and outlooks on life. But in Everblue, the author uses a minimal writing style that doesn't complement the first-person perspective. I never got the sense that either character was talking right at me. Instead, it seemed like I was reading a mandatory writing assignment that they had to do for school, something they weren't having much fun with. I can't fault the author too much for this, because a lot of books use the first-person perspective when they could have just as easily told their stories in the third person. But I can fault her for making it seem awkward when she alternates between the two lead characters from chapter to chapter, especially since this can lead to chapters that seem pretty short. I remember one chapter being only 2 paragraphs long. Surely that could have been expanded or cut entirely with little consequence. At any rate, I highly recommend this to Twilight fans. I mean, they do know that Stephenie Meyer doesn't have the monopoly on paranormal romance, right? Hell, they should really branch out and discover something that's better than Twilight, even if it has mermaids instead of vegetarian vampires who sparkle in the sun. It takes a little while for the story to really get interesting, but it does eventually. But that's only if you can stomach the usually sugary content of romances. And it's only the first part in a 4-part series, and the excerpt from the second book seems interesting since the characters are brought further out from their comfort zones. Since I have this book on my Kindle Fire, Amazon gave me recommendations on quite a number of other mermaid tales. So, if you like mermaids, then you're in luck. There are plenty of reviewer-pleasing stories out there. And as we all know, mermaids are far sexier than vampires. I mean, seriously. Mermaids. Google that shit. I'm Jason Hubbard. Thanks for listening to Fantasy View, and please, keep reading.